சீனா நாட்டை குறித்து தேவன் என்னிடத்தில் சொன்னார்.
He said about China.
சீனாவுக்கு பேரழிவின் வருடம்.
There will be vast distraction.
சீனாவுக்கு விரோதமாய் சில நாடுகள் எழும்பும்.
Some countries will come against China.
Military tensions between the two superpowers are brewing.
பிரான்ஸ் நாட்டில் போராட்டங்கள் ஓயவே ஓயாது.
There will be chain of riots.
என் அருமையான தேவனுடைய பிள்ளைகளே, பிரான்ஸ் நாட்டு மக்கள் வீதிகளில் வந்து போராட்டங்கள் செய்வார்கள்.
People will come into the street and they will struggle against
அரசுக்கும் மக்களுக்கும் அங்கே போராட்டம் உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
Clashes between government and people.
Vite fait.
Protests turned violent in France Saturday as riot police fired tear gas at some protesters while arresting others during anti-racism rallies in Paris and Nantes, France. People gathered in Place de la République, chanting "No justice, no peace" beneath the statue of Marianne.
பரிசுத்த ஆவியானவர் என்னோடு கூட சொன்னது.
Spirit of God said.
ஜெர்மனி நாட்டை குறித்து கர்த்தர் சொன்னார். ஜெர்மனி தேசத்தில்
in Germany.
என் அன்பு தேவனுடைய பிள்ளைகளே, மிகப்பெரிய பிளவுகள் ஏற்படும் அரசுக்கும் மக்களுக்கும்.
There will be violent divisions among the people.
There will be riots,
struggles.
From right-wing radicals to those who reject the authority of the German government or doubt the severity or even existence of the pandemic, they were unified by one belief: the government's measures to tackle the coronavirus pandemic go too far.
Person also said that the police are simply
water cannon and pepper spray deployed by police to disperse the demonstrators. Thousands gathered near the German parliament building. A crowd including anti-government protesters, coronavirus skeptics, and members of
துருக்கி நாட்டை குறித்து ஆண்டவர் அடுத்தபடியாக சொன்னார்.
He said about Turkey.
துருக்கியில் மிகப்பெரிய அளவு
in
போராட்டங்கள் உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
There will be large scale
பெரிய அழிவு உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
Vast disaster.
Well, we begin with breaking news. A strong earthquake in the Aegean Sea has shaken Turkey and Greece. Rescuers are searching for survivors after the magnitude 7 quake caused a building to collapse. There is no information at this time.
Turkey is crisscrossed by active fault lines, the danger always lying beneath. Rescuers picked their way carefully through the rubble, here finding a survivor and gently cradling his head. The man was brought out alive, like dozens of others. And for some, emotional reunions, social distancing swept away by the chaos and the relief. Izmir bore the
திலர்கள் உடைமைகளை இழந்து தவிப்பார்கள்.
Some lost their belongings, sir.
அங்கே தீ பற்றி எரியும்.
There will be fire accidents.
இவை எல்லாம் நீங்கள் காண்பீர்கள்.
You will see through the media.
Kimse söndüremez.
Aşağıdan başlayacaklar bence zaten hemen.
Bak petrol üstünü boşaltıyorlar, kaçıyorlar. Bu tarafa nasıl sıçamazsam?
Burayı ne sıçrayacak Allah aşkına? Önce şu evlerini yapması lazım.
Ne biçim konuşuyor ya?
Yanmaz o kadar da değil.
Allah'ım gitti bütün ağaçlar ya.
Yazık ya, cayır cayır.
ஸ்பெயின் நாட்டை குறித்து கர்த்தர் சொன்னார்.
He said about Spain.
ஸ்பெயின் நாட்டில் மிகப்பெரிய துப்பாக்கி சூடு நடக்கும்.
There will be gun shooting
பெரிய அளவிலே நடக்கும்.
in large scale.
Protesters looted shops and clashed with police on Saturday night. In the northern Spanish city of Logroño, police reported being attacked by around
வேதனையின் சம்பவங்கள் ஸ்பெயினில் நடக்கும்.
Heartbreaking things will take place.
அடுத்தபடியாக வெயிலின் தாக்கங்கள் ஸ்பெயின் நாட்டில் அதிகமாக இருக்கும்.
Heat will increase.
The heat wave has been hitting major parts of Europe of late. Most countries in Europe are already dealing with the existing COVID-19 pandemic, which has wreaked havoc. The heat has been intense in most parts of Spain in the past few weeks. The stifling hot heat took over the whole of southern Spain this past week. Temperatures exceeded 43 centigrade according to the Spanish Meteorological Agency. A resident who is a senior citizen says that they are facing a very hard time due to the heat wave.
Figúrate, muy mal, muy mal. ¿Cómo se va a llevar? Que sale uno y se tiene que meter debajo de la sombra o debajo de la ducha rápido, porque esto es demasiado.
சீரிய நாட்டை குறித்து கர்த்தர் அடுத்தபடியாக சொன்னார்.
He said about Syria.
சீரிய தேசத்திலே
In Syria,
மக்கள் மிகவும் அபாயகரமான சம்பவத்தை சந்தித்து வேதனைப்படுவார்கள்.
People will meet heartbreaking incidents.
அங்கே அபாய குரல்கள் அதிகரிக்கும்.
There will be voice of trouble will
புலம்பும்
increase.
சத்தம் கேட்கும்.
Lamentation
இரத்த
will
ஆறுகள் ஓடும்.
There will be bloodshed.
பிணங்கள் குவியலாக எடுப்பார்கள்.
They will take the bodies
சீரிய
from the
நாடு
body.
புகையாகவே காணப்படும்.
The smoke will cover the face of the country.
இவைகள் எல்லாம் நீங்கள் டிவிகளில் ஊடகத்திலே பார்ப்பீர்கள்.
You will see this thing through the media.
Conflict in Syria is on the verge of a dangerous escalation, according to a senior UN official who warned that the cost to civilians could be instant and huge. Nearly 1 million people, mostly women and children, have fled the onslaught, and some are now dying from the cold. It's the biggest movement of displaced people in Syria's 9-year conflict. This report from our international correspondent Orla Girin in Istanbul contains some distressing images.
Dazed and frightened after surviving a recent airstrike. Just imagine what his young eyes have seen. Senior UN officials are pleading for a ceasefire, pleading for the global community to remember its areas to rubble, forcing almost 1 million of his own people to run for their lives in the past 2 months. One aid worker says this is Syria's doomsday.
Strategies on the battlefield with dangerous consequences.
அடுத்தபடியாக
Next,
ஜப்பான் நாட்டை குறித்து ஆண்டவர்
he
சொன்னார்.
said about Japan.
ஜப்பான் நாட்டின்
In Japan,
மிகப்பெரிய அளவிலே அழிவு
there will
உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
be distraction in large
ஜப்பானின் நவமி
scale.
அதிர்ச்சிகள்
There will
உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
be earth tremors.
இயற்கையின் பேர் அழிவு
There will
உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
be nature disaster.
There's a place where mercy reigns and never dies. There's a place where streams of grace.
ஜப்பானின் நாட்டின் பொருளாதாரங்கள் சற்று சரியும்.
There will be some financial set.
The scale of Japan's contraction is worse than even the most pessimistic forecasts. It would translate into an annualized decline of more than 27% for an economy that was already in recession.
It took a big hit in the last quarter of 2019, and then the coronavirus effect began to come in 2020. So the Japanese economy is in a world of hurt.
இந்தோனேசியாவை குறித்து பரிசுத்த ஆவியானவர் சொன்னார்.
He said about Indonesia.
இந்தோனேசியா நாட்டில் மிகப்பெரிய அளவிலே இயற்கையின் பேரழிவு உண்டாயிருக்கு.
Nature disaster in great magnitude.
சில இடங்கள் இல்லாமலே போகும்.
Some places will disappear.
The heaviest rainfall in more than a decade has caused deaths and flooding in Jakarta and surrounding areas in West Java. The rain began on Tuesday night and triggered landslides on the city's outskirts. Indonesia's meteorology department has called the rain very extreme.
பார்த்தாலும் பிணங்கள் காணப்படும்.
Wherever dead body.
தாய்லாந்து நாட்டிலே தேவ கோபம் இறங்கி இருக்கிறது.
The wrath of God is came.
இயற்கையானது விரோதமாய் செயல்படும்.
Nature will come against Thailand.
என் அன்பு தேவனுடைய பிள்ளைகளே, ஹாங்காங்கில் சமாதானம் இராது.
There will be no peace.
என் அன்பு தேவனுடைய பிள்ளைகளே, இரண்டு தரப்பு மக்களுக்குள்ளே மிகப்பெரிய கலவரங்கள் உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
Clashes between two races.
There's a place where mercy reigns and never dies. There's a place where streams of grace flow deep and wide. There's a place where mercy reigns and never dies. There's a place where streams of grace flow deep and wide.
சமாதானத்துக்குரிய காரியம் நடக்கும்.
Peace talks will take place.
உடனே அது நடக்காது.
But will not take immediately.
அந்த நாட்டிலே பொருளாதாரங்கள் சரியும்.
There will be financial setback.
Breaking numbers out of the Hong Kong economy. Fourth quarter GDP dropped 0.4%. That's a lot better than the estimate, Stephen. The number for the full year, 1.2%. The drop for the full year, 1.2%. Better than the estimate at 1.4%. What's going on?
Yeah, I think the estimates were pretty dire, in fact. And of course, we've had all these headwinds from the U.S.-China trade war, which really hammered Hong Kong as a proxy to the mainland on the trade front. But then we had 7+ months of violent unrest on the streets of Hong Kong, which really hammered demand in the services industries and hospitality, tourism, travel. Chinese mainland visitors dried up, and now they've completely gone away because of the coronavirus. So,
பிரேசில் நடக்கும் சம்பவங்கள்.
Things happened.
பிரேசில் நாட்டில் கலவரங்கள் உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
There will be riots.
They're black and poor. Police said the protesters were throwing stones, so they confronted them with tear gas and non-lethal force. Related incidents, a surge of hundreds in the state with a long history of police brutality, and as people have not only been protesting in Rio de Janeiro, but in other cities as well. They say racism is already part of Brazil's reality, and President Jair Bolsonaro is making the situation worse.
அழிவு உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
There will be nature disasters.
பூமி அதிர்ச்சி உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
There will be earthquake.
மக்கள் மிகவும் பாதிக்கப்படுவார்கள்.
People will afflict.
Nossa senhora! Nossa! Nossa, destruiu tudo! Ai, amor!
Aí na casa, outra casa, olha!
Olha!
Eita porra. Caralho. Caralho. Meu Deus.
Vem carro descendo na chuva, na enxurrada, carro sozinho. Vixe aí.
அடுத்தபடியாக
Then
நம்முடைய தகப்பன்
our father,
நம்முடைய ராஜா
our king,
பிறந்த தேசத்தை குறித்து கர்த்தர் சொன்னார். இஸ்ரவேல் நாட்டை குறித்து கர்த்தர் வெளிப்படுத்தின இஸ்ரவேலின் வல்லமை இந்த ஆண்டு அதிகரிக்கும்.
in this year Israel will be strong more and more.
என் அன்பு தேவனுடைய பிள்ளைகளே,
Beloved,
இஸ்ரவேலை சுற்றியுள்ள நாடுகள் இரவும் பகலும் வெடி சத்தத்தை கேட்டுக்கொண்டே இருக்கும்.
surrounded countries will hear bomb blast sounds.
இஸ்ரவேலுக்கு விரோதமாக எழும்புகிற நாடுகள் இஸ்ரவேலை அடிபணிய வைக்க காத்திருக்கும். ஆனால் இஸ்ரவேலுக்கு மற்ற நாடுகள் அடிபணியும்.
Which countries come against Israel, they will bow down before Israel.
இந்த நாட்டை தேவன் வல்லமையாய் பாதுகாப்பார்.
God will protect this country with his
இஸ்ரவேலின்
arm.
நாட்டின் பலத்தை கண்டு,
The power of Israel,
அதன் விசேஷத்தை கண்டு,
for the speciality of
அதன்
Israel,
வல்லமைகளை கண்டு,
for the power of Israel,
மற்ற நாடுகள் அஞ்சும் இஸ்ரவேல் நாட்டிற்கு.
other countries will tremble before Israel.
தேவன் அந்த நாட்டை மேன்மைப்படுத்த போகிறார்.
God is going to bless that country.
கரங்களை தட்டி இஸ்ரவேலின் தேவனுக்கு 3 அல்லேலூயா
Let us
சொல்லலாம்.
clap to the Lord of Israel.
லண்டன் தேசத்தை குறித்து கர்த்தர்
He
சொன்னார்.
said about London,
லண்டன் நாட்டில் இந்த வருஷம் துக்கத்தின் வருடம் லண்டன் நாட்டுக்கு.
this is a sorrowful year for London.
மிகப்பெரிய அழிவும் இருக்கும்.
There will be worst
சமாதானம் இராது.
no peace.
Seems that the spread is now being driven by the new variant of the virus, which we spoke about earlier this week. And although there's considerable uncertainty, it may be up to 70% more transmissible than the old variant, the original version of the disease. It is with a very heavy heart, I must tell you, we cannot continue with Christmas as planned. In England, those living in Tier 4 areas should not mix with anyone outside their own household at Christmas, though support bubbles will remain in place for those at particular risk of loneliness or isolation.
But this virus in its new mutation is spreading faster than the proverbial wildfire right across the UK. Movement between England and Scotland has been stopped. Movement between neighbourhoods in most parts of the country has been stopped almost entirely. The situation is becoming quite alarming. Hospitals are already 90% full. In many cases now, ambulances have had to be turned away from hospitals because there's no room to admit the patients. The government fears that this could get worse and in fact will get worse because the worst of the spread is expected in days ahead. Several countries have banned travel from the UK and more bans are almost certain to follow. And let's not forget that it was movement of people primarily from UK that led to the very fast spread in India earlier this year. The fact is that while there have been a few protests, those have been driven by people in businesses that have been affected by this near lockdown now. That kind of protest really doesn't take into account the bigger picture, and that bigger picture is beginning to look very worrying.
லண்டனில் கலவரங்கள் அதிகமாய் உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
There will be a riot in large London.
They are the images organisers of this protest had desperately hoped to avoid. But for a second night, police officers under attack from an angry crowd around Whitehall. Running for cover as protesters threw bottles and other objects at them. As the officers headed under the arches in King Charles Street, reinforcements from the Met's Public Order Unit rushed in to hold the police line. At least one officer we saw suffered a head injury in the violence. As more reinforcements arrived, police began making some arrests before gaining control and holding off the crowd. These images will deeply worry police commanders and the Home Secretary, already incensed about the violence here just a day earlier. 2 weeks after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, The passion and sense of injustice is still profound.
லண்டன் தேசத்தை குறித்து கர்த்தர்
He
சொன்னார்.
said about London,
லண்டனில் கலவரங்கள் அதிகமாய் உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
there will be riot in large
சமாதானம் இராது.
no peace.
There's a place where mercy reigns and never dies.
கொரிய நாட்டை குறித்து கர்த்தர்
He
சொன்னார்.
said about Korea,
இதுவரையிலும் இருந்த வட கொரியா இந்த வருடம் மிகவும் வேதனையில் பிரவேசிக்க போகிறது.
North Korea will enter into sorrows.
இயற்கை அதற்கு விரோதமாய் செயல்படுகிறது.
Nature will come against them.
அடுத்தபடியாக
Next,
ஆஸ்திரேலியா நாட்டை குறித்து ஆண்டவர்
he
சொன்னார்.
said about Australia,
மிகவும் பேருள்ள நகரங்கள், பெயர் பெற்ற நகரங்கள்
famous cities in Australia.
இயற்கையின் அழிவை சந்திக்கும்.
There'll be natural disasters.
Turn next to the fire catastrophe in Australia, where the nation's largest evacuation is now underway. The death toll rising, and tonight the staggering toll on the nation's wildlife. ABC's Maggie Rulli is on the fire line in New South Wales.
Tonight, the dire warning from Australia's Prime Minister. The worst fire disaster in the country's history could go on for months.
What was it like here?
Oh, horrific. Horrific. Everything. Yesterday was really terrible. Really bad.
Apocalyptic scenes. The inferno is now forcing the largest peacetime evacuation ever.
My house is gone.
And for the first time, the country calling up 3,000 military reserves to battle the raging wildfires.
We cannot guarantee your safety at present.
At least 24 people have been killed. An estimated 500 million animals have also died, including many of the country's iconic koalas and kangaroos.
Wind here just keeps picking up. It is fueling these flames. You can feel the smoke stinging your eyes. You can feel that heat off of the fire. It is radiating right now. It is absolutely incinerating all of this brush, all of these trees. Many of these are going to go in any second.
The fire's generating so much heat, authorities say they're creating their own weather system, including several fire tornadoes. The choking smoke now carrying as far away as New Zealand, causing this eerie orange glow in the skies over Auckland, more than 1,200 miles away.
Gave way to leaving the North Richmond crossing barely recognisable.
It's been an incredible spectacle.
It's not hard to see why the Parramatta River is also on flood watch. Collaroy rock pool resembling washing machine, while just north at Narrabeen, the kids were making the most of it. This car going for a swim in the local lake. The highest wave recorded off Sydney, a monstrous 13.9 metres. There was even swell at harbour beaches like Balmoral.
கடலில் வாழும் உயிரினங்கள்
The creature in
செத்து
the ocean
ஒடுங்கும்.
will die and
இது
reach
பேரழிவை உண்டாக்கும்.
It is worst
இவைகள்
disaster.
அடையாளங்கள்.
These are the signs.
தேவனுடைய வருகைக்கும் இது
These
அடையாளங்கள்.
are the sign of the visitation
கைகளை
of
தட்டி
God.
ஆவியானவருக்கு.
Let us clap.
Pilot Wales, Tasmania. Almost 400 die in Australia's worst stranding. About 380 whales have died in what is suspected to be Australia's largest stranding on record, officials say. Since Monday, hundreds of long-fin pilot whales have been found beached on Tasmania's west coast. Rescuers had managed to save 50 by late on Wednesday, and they were trying to help the remaining estimated 30 whales. Tasmanian government officials said the rescue effort would continue as long as there are live animals. While they're still alive and in water, there's still hope for them, but as time goes on they do become more fatigued, said Nick Dika. He added focus would now also shift to removing the hundreds of carcasses scattered along the coast. It is not fully understood why the whales became stranded. The species is known to be prone to getting beached. The stranding, one of the largest globally, eclipses a previous national record of 320 set in Western Australia in 1996. Where were the whales found? The whales largely washed up on sand spits in the waters around an area called Macquarie Heads. The first rescuers on Monday counted about 270 whales, but a helicopter on Tuesday spotted another 200 dead whales nearby. Rescue efforts had been hampered by a strong tide, which had brought some freed whales back to shore, they added. Whale experts said the surviving animals would be exhausted and weak. Pilot whales can grow up to 7 meters, 22 feet long, and weigh up to 3 tons.
Next.
பெல்ஜியத்தை குறித்து ஆண்டவர் சொன்னார்.
About Belgium.
பெல்ஜியம் நாட்டிலே
In Belgium.
வன்முறைகளும் போராட்டங்களும் உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
There will be riot and
வீதிகளிலே அது நடக்கும்.
It will take place in the streets.
நீங்கள் எல்லாரும் ஊடகத்திலே பார்ப்பீர்கள்.
You will see through the media.
Rallies have also been taking place on this side of the Atlantic, with major demonstrations in Rome, Barcelona and Copenhagen. In Brussels, initially peaceful demonstrations turned violent as crowds clashed with riot police and looters raided luxury shops in the city centre. Our correspondent Jack Parrick has the story for us.
Fending off missiles in central Brussels. Riot police dividing a number of small groups around the Porte de Namur metro station. Inflamed tensions. In their water cannons. Officers also using tear gas to try to dispel people who were protesting against police brutality.
சூடான் நாட்டை குறித்து ஆண்டவர் சொன்னார். சூடானில் மிகப்பெரிய அளவில் வன்முறைகளும் பொருளாதார சரிவும் நில அதிர்வும் மிகப்பெரிய கொடுமையில் நடக்கும்.
There will be riot, financial setbacks and natural disaster.
Sudan's government declared an economic emergency this week as the Sudanese pound lost value and inflation soared. The Sudanese pound, which traded at 135 to the US dollar in August, was down to 250 per US dollar as of Monday this week.
In some places, police fired tear gas to prevent protesters from breaching security cordons. Tuesday's protests were on the first anniversary of demonstrations last year. They pressured the Transitional Military Council to negotiate with protest leaders. Weeks after the killing of dozens at a pro-democracy sit-in in Khartoum shattered hopes for a deal. A power-sharing agreement was signed in August, but nearly a year on, many of its conditions still aren't implemented.
பாக்தாத்தை குறித்து ஆண்டவர் சொன்னார்.
Is it about Baghdad?
பாக்தாத்தில் இரத்த ஆறுகள் ஓடும்.
There will be bloodshed.
மிகப்பெரிய அளவிலே பாதிப்பு உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
Destruction in large scale.
The aftermath shows an attack that was deliberate and sustained. With around a half dozen explosions, the Americans firing with drones clearly didn't want to miss their target. Iran's general Qasem Soleimani. He'd reportedly just gotten into Iraq from Beirut and was leaving Baghdad airport when he was killed in a
Czech என்ற குடியரசு நாடு.
Czech Republic.
மிகப்பெரிய அளவிலே வன்முறைகள் கலவரங்கள் உண்டாயிருக்கும்.
There will be riot in large scale.
மக்கள் பாதிக்கப்படுவார்கள்.
People will afflict.
அந்த நாட்டிலே மிகப்பெரிய போலீசினுடைய வல்லமைகள் அதிகரித்து போலீசின் கட்டுப்பாட்டிலே அந்த நாடு மக்களை கண்ட்ரோல் வைத்துக் கொண்டிருக்கும்.
The country is submerged into the control of police department.
அந்த நாட்டின் மக்களுக்கு சந்தோஷம் இராது.
There will be no joy in their people.
இதை நீங்கள் காண்பீர்கள்.
You will see that.
பூச்சிகளின் எண்ணிக்கை அதிகரிக்கும்.
Insects will increase.
தேசங்களின் இயற்கை வகைகளை அவைகள் தின்று தீர்க்கும்.
It will destroy the vegetation.
அவைகளின் உருவங்கள் அலங்கோலமாய் இருக்கும்.
And 1 square kilometer can contain at least 40 million locust adults. What's more, in just a single day, these hungry insects can eat the same amount of food that 35,000 human beings would be capable of. And desert locusts are fast. They are known to travel about 130 kilometers a day. The current swarms first originated in the Arabian Peninsula. But unusual heavy rains created good breeding grounds and allowed the locusts to multiply for months without agriculture experts detecting them.
இவைகளை காணும்போது தேவனுடைய வருகையின் அடையாளமாய் இருக்கும் என்று கர்த்தர் சொன்னார்.
When you see, this is the sign of the visitation of God.
இவைகளை கட்டாயம் நீங்கள் காண்பீர்கள்.
Surely you will see.
அடுத்தபடியாக விமான விபத்து இந்த வருடம் அதிகமாய் நடக்கும்.
In this year there will be aircraft accidents.
A passenger plane split in two after it overshot the runway and fell 35 feet into a gorge. Many have died and scores injured, some in serious condition. The plane was carrying 190 people, including 10 infants and 7 crew members. Both the pilot and co-pilot have lost their lives.
National Airlines plane with more than 100 people on board has crashed into a residential area in the city of Karachi. The plane was flying from Lahore when it came down near Model Colony. It's a neighbourhood of Karachi, right near Jinnah International Airport. Large crowds have gathered at the scene, as you can see here. Ambulances are really struggling, we understand, to get to the site of the crash, and local hospitals have declared a state of emergency.
In Istanbul, Turkey, video shows the flight landing in wet weather, then disappearing into a ditch. Passengers scrambled to safety through a gaping crack in the fuselage. Roxana Saberi has more.
The plane snapped into 3 pieces after skidding off a wet runway and dropping into a ditch. The impact of the crash was so strong, the front of the fuselage even flipped upside down. Still, most of the 183 passengers and crew on board managed to survive.
Tonight, tragedy on the runway. A medical evacuation plane bursting into flames shortly after takeoff at a Manila airport in the Philippines. Huge pillars of smoke rising from the wreckage of the Lion Air plane. 8 p.m. local time. The plane was carrying 3 medical personnel, 3 crew members and 2 patients. All 8 people were killed, an American and Canadian among the dead.
தீவுகள் உள்ள தேசங்கள் இல்லாமல் போகும்.
Countries having island will disappear.
Station left behind by Hurricane Eta. Before we get into that, let's take a look at the movement of the Hurricane Iota so far. The hurricane has been described as exceptionally dangerous. It is expected to be the strongest storm of 2020 so far. It is moving west and has made landfall in Nicaragua. The life-threatening storm will raise water levels by 15 to 20 feet above the normal tide levels. And according to the National Hurricane Center in Miami, the maximum wind speed reached 155 miles per hour.
Dramatic video from the Colombian island of San Andres showing huge waves crashing against the shore as Hurricane Iota came roaring in. Iota made landfall in northeastern Nicaragua last night as a Category 4 storm with maximum winds of near
இந்தியா தேசத்தை குறித்து இந்தியாவிலே கர்த்தருடைய பார்வை அலங்கோலமாக வியாகுலத்தோடு வேதனையோடு இருந்ததை கண்டேன்.
The sight of God is not pleasure.
வட இந்தியாவில்
In North India,
தேவன் அவ்வப்பொழுது வாதைகளை அனுப்புவார்.
He will send some plagues.
வட இந்தியாவை குறித்து ஆண்டவர் சொன்ன தீர்க்கதரிசனம்
Prophecy about North India.
எகிப்தின் மேல் தேவகோபம் எப்படி இறங்கினதோ அதே போலவே அதே மாதிரி தேவன் வட இந்தியாவில் இறங்குவார் தன் கோபத்தை.
How the Lord sent wrath upon Egypt, same way he will send wrath upon North India.
Going over to the worst affected states, Maharashtra stands on top with total cases now at
38,461, and the death toll in Maharashtra at 9,893.
இந்தியாவில் சமாதானம் இராது.
There will be no peace in India.
இந்தியாவில் ராணுவ வீரர்கள் சுறுசுறுப்பாய் செயல்படுவார்கள்.
Army people will act very fast.
வீரர்களுடைய காரியங்கள் மிகவும் பரிதாபமாய் இருக்கும்.
Unpleasant for their life.
India says at least 20 of its soldiers were killed in a clash with Chinese forces, raising the original number of casualties at first reported. The hand-to-hand fighting taking place along a disputed border in the Himalayas. China has accused India of a provocation and has not disclosed if any of its troops were killed. Tensions between the two sides have been building over the last month, but this is the first incident with fatalities in more than 4 decades.
இந்தியா செழிப்பை இழந்து காணப்படும்.
India will lose its flourishes.
இந்தியாவில் பஞ்சம் உண்டாயிருக்கும், பொருளாதாரங்கள் சரியும்.
There will be famine and financial setbacks.
India has slipped into a recession. Its economy shrank by 7.5% in the July to September period. This follows a record slump of nearly 24% in the preceding 3 months. And even as India struggles to fight the pandemic, analysts say they expect GDP to also contract in the December quarter. For the current fiscal year, the economy is seen shrinking by 8.7%. That would be India's worst economic performance in at least 4 decades.
இந்தியாவில் இரத்த ஆறுகள் ஓடும்.
There will be bloodshed in India.
டெல்லியில் அநேகர் கைது செய்யப்படுவார்கள். டெல்லி இந்த வருஷம் இருள் சூழ்ந்தே இருக்கும்.
The darkness will cover the face of Delhi.
என் அருமையான தேவனுடைய பிள்ளைகளே, வட இந்தியாவில்
In North India,
வன்முறைகள் வெடிக்கும்.
There will be riots.
திடுக்கிடும் சம்பவங்கள் நடக்கும்.
Heartbreaking news will take place.
35 people have died and over 200 injured in the worst communal riots in decades.
இந்தியாவில் வெப்பங்கள் அதிகரிக்கும்.
Heat increase.
Temperatures are hovering between 44 and 47 degrees in most parts of these regions, and Rajasthan is the worst affected. Churu and Sri Ganganagar recording temperatures of 48 degrees and above.
இந்தியா மிகப்பெரிய இயற்கையின் அழிவுக்கு நேராய் நடத்தப்படும்.
India, there will be worst violent nature disaster.
Several other challenges have come up over the past couple of weeks. A heat wave has hit several parts of India. Parts of the northeast are battling floods, and several states in northwestern India are battling a locust attack. Talking first of the heat wave, the Indian Meteorological Department has said that the present heat wave conditions are likely to prevail over the next 24 hours. Plains of northwest India, central India and interior parts of eastern India are worst impacted, and an orange alert remains in place. Severe heat wave with a red alert has been predicted in some parts of Vidarbha and West Rajasthan.
வட இந்தியா ஜலத்திற்கு ஒப்பு கொடுக்கப்படுகிறது.
North India hand over into flood.
ஜலத்தின் திரள் பேரழிவை உண்டாக்கும்.
There will be flood and it will
ஜலம் வாரிக்கொள்ளும்.
It will climb.
The capital and even adjoining Gurugram and Noida got literally flooded. Take a look at these visuals from 3 different areas from Delhi and NCR. The heavy rainfall in the Millennium City of Gurugram wreaked havoc. Key roads, golf course underpass started to get flooded, and that waterlogging caused in return heavy traffic snarls, massive inconvenience to the local residents. To help people, authorities have deployed civil defense volunteers, and while that was the situation in Gurugram, in the national capital Delhi also there was heavy waterlogging and traffic jams.
இந்தியாவில் தீ விபத்து அதிகரிக்கும்.
There will be fire accidents in India.
While one fire broke out in Gujarat's Kambat, another broke out in Vadodara of Gujarat. A major fire broke out at a chemical factory in Kambat of Anand district in Gujarat. The fire started at warehouse of J Chemicals, a dyestuff manufacturing company. Fire broke out Saturday late night, and it took more than 6 hours to douse the fire.
explosion was reported at ONGC Hazira plant in Surat in Gujarat. Shockwaves from the blast could be felt up to 3 to 4 kilometers away, shaking buildings and damaging windows. Fire tenders were rushed to the spot from stations and the industrial fire safety units of Surat. No casualties.
This morning around 6 a.m. Fire broke out at this particular building, and it engulfed the entire structure, and people they started crying for help from rooftop as well as their windows. And immediately after learning about this fire tragedy, fire tenders and local administration, Vijayawada City Police senior officials and other persons rushed for the rescue. Ambulance were brought in, and now the fire has been doused. Situation has brought under control. 7 persons have lost their life. 15 others they have been shifted to other hospitals. Search and for other persons, if anyone is trapped, it is on inside the hotel and its debris.
And at around 11 p.m. this has reported, and due to the timing, there was no people working in that company, even though it is said that a couple of people have been received burning injuries and they have been rushed to this nearby hospitals by the local authorities, and 12 fire engines were rushed to the spot too, and they were dousing the fire. Still now we are waiting for the official version, and yet all the officials are on the spot and ensuring that fire is doused completely and it is not spread to other companies.
இந்தியாவில் அரசியல் தலைவர்கள் பெரியவர்கள் மரணமடைவார்கள்.
Political leaders will leave.
என் அருமையான தேவனுடைய பிள்ளைகளே, இந்தியாவில் கொடிகள் அரை கம்பத்தில் பறக்க நேரிடும்.
Unfortunately, the flags of India will fly in half mast.
Again one more time. இந்தியாவின் கொடி, அதாவது நம்முடைய தேசத்தினுடைய நேஷனல் பிளாக் அரை கம்பத்தில் பறக்க நேரிடும் சூழ்நிலை வரும்.
Unfortunately, our national flag will fly in half mast.
இவை எல்லாம் தேசத்தில் நடக்கும் சம்பவங்கள்.
These things will going to take place in India.
நம்முடைய தமிழ்நாடு.
Now about our Tamil Nadu.
கரங்களை தட்டி இஸ்ரவேலின் தேவனுக்கு ஒரு அல்லேலூயா சொல்லலாம்.
Let us clap and say hallelujah.
தமிழ்நாடு வெளிப்பாட்டின் விதம்,
the way of the revelation.
தமிழ்நாட்டில் அரசியல் மிகப்பெரிய பொருளாதார பாதிப்புகள் ஏற்படும்.
There will be affliction in financial.
தமிழ்நாட்டில் வியாபாரிகள் வியாபாரம் செய்யும் மக்கள் பாதிக்கப்படுவார்கள்.
Business people will afflict in large.
தமிழ்நாட்டில் பஞ்சம் மிக அளவிலே ஏற்படும்.
There will be famine in large scale.
இந்த வருடம் மேன்மை இராது.
This is not a pleasant year for Tamil Nadu.
தமிழ்நாட்டின் சில கட்சிகள் மிகவும் பிளவு ஏற்பட்டு பிரிந்து போகும். தலைவர்கள் மரணமடைவார்கள். தனியாய் பிரேயர் செய்கிற தனிப்பட்ட மனுஷனுடைய ஜெபம் அவனுக்கு அற்புதங்களை கொண்டு வருமாம்.
Individual prayers will bring miracles.
நான் திரும்ப சொல்லுகிறேன்.
Again I tell you,
ஒவ்வொரு தனிப்பட்டுடைய வாழ்க்கையும் ஜெபத்தை இந்த ஆண்டுகளை அதிகரித்துக் கொள்ளுங்கள்.
Individual increase your prayer life.
அது உங்களுக்கு அற்புதங்களை கொண்டு வரும்.
It will bring down miracles in your life.